In the high reaches of the untamed wilderness, nature doesn't just exist, it dominates. Here, a blizzard isn't just weather, it's a wall of white that erases everything it touches, leaving only the sound of the wind and the bite of the ice. In a deadly storm where the line between life and death vanishes in a heartbeat, even the strongest don't survive for long. The cold is a predator that never sleeps, a silent killer waiting for the first sign of weakness to claim another soul. For those caught in its grasp, the mountain becomes a beautiful, terrifying tomb. The silence is absolute, broken only by the roar of the gale. Elias was a man trained for war, but this was a different kind of battle, one where the enemy had no face and no mercy. He was miles from the nearest extraction point, caught in a once-in-a-century storm that had turned the familiar terrain into a nightmare. Every muscle burned with the effort of each step. Every breath felt like inhaling shards of glass, freezing his lungs from the inside out. He was moving on instinct alone, a solitary figure in a world that wanted him gone, fighting for a tomorrow that seemed more distant with every passing second. He knew his time was running out. Every second spent in the open was a gamble he was losing. At first, he thought it was the exhaustion playing tricks on his mind. A shadow in the corner of his eye, a movement that didn't match the rhythm of the falling snow. He stopped, his heart hammering against his ribs, a drumbeat of adrenaline in the silence. He wasn't alone. Something was out there, ghosting his trail, waiting in the silence between the gusts of wind. It was a presence felt before it was seen, a ghost in the whiteout. A sound finally broke through, a faint, high-pitched whimper that didn't belong to the wind, a desperate cry that cut through the cold like a knife, a cry of pure, unadulterated fear. He pushed toward the sound, expecting a predator, but finding something far more vulnerable. Tucked into the lee of a frozen rock were two tiny wolf cubs, barely more than a few weeks old. They were huddled together for a warmth that was rapidly escaping them, their small bodies racked with tremors. They were orphan spirits in a frozen hell, with no mother and no pack to guide them. Only the encroaching ice and the indifference of the storm. Their mother was likely gone, a victim of the same lethal cold that now threatened to consume them, leaving them alone at the edge of the world, abandoned by nature itself. The logic of survival was clear and cruel. To stay was to die. To carry them was to risk everything he had left. Elias knew he was barely holding on to his own life, his reserves spent and his strength failing. He was a soldier, taught to prioritize the mission, and right now, the mission was to reach shelter before he froze. He began to walk away, his boots crunching heavily in the deep snow, trying to drown out the guilt. But the sight of those two small lives, watching him fade into the white, pulled at something deeper than his training. It was the ultimate test of humanity, in a place where humanity was a liability. Could he live with the weight of leaving them? He didn't choose them, but in that moment, they chose him. With the last of their fading strength, the cubs dragged themselves from the relative shelter of the rock. They followed the only path they had, the deep, jagged craters left by a giant. They stumbled, they fell, and they disappeared beneath the drifts, but they kept moving. They weren't just following a person. They were following the only source of warmth and life they could find. Elias heard their cries, a sound that cut through the thunder of the wind like a physical blow. He stopped. He realized he couldn't do it. He couldn't leave them behind to be buried by the mountain. He couldn't be their executioner. At that moment, the mission changed forever. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a sanctuary. He scooped them up, their tiny hearts beating frantically against his palms like trapped birds. He tucked them deep inside his jacket, sharing the only heat he had left, his own life force. He could feel their shivering begin to subside as his body heat enveloped them, a silent pact made in the eye of the storm. He was now carrying 3 lives, and the weight was more than physical. The stakes were higher, and the path was more dangerous, but he felt a new sense of purpose that the cold could not touch. He was their lighthouse now. The hours that followed were a blur of pain, ice, and absolute darkness. The storm reached its peak, a screaming wall of white that threatened to bury him where he stood. Elias pushed through the void, his world reduced to the few feet visible in his headlamp's fading beam. His muscles burned with a fire that the ice couldn't quench, and his vision began to tunnel from pure exhaustion. But every time he felt like giving up, he felt the tiny rhythmic movements against his chest. Those lives were counting on him to be more than human. He navigated forests that felt like a maze of frozen claws, moving on a map of hope alone. The night seemed to have no end, and the cold was a heavy cloak he couldn't shed. When the door finally crashed open, the cold was left screaming on the other side of the threshold. Elias fell to the floor, the silence of the room a physical shock after the roar of the mountain. He stayed there for a long time, just breathing, feeling the weight of the journey lift from his shoulders. Slowly, he unzipped his jacket, and two small, curious faces emerged, their eyes reflecting the dim light of the cabin. They had survived the impossible. They had made it through the heart of the storm. But the night was still long, and the true healing was just beginning. Elias knew the fire was the next battle he had to win to keep them all alive. Slowly, life returned to the room. The fire's warmth did what the sun could not, pushing back the shadows and the chill that had settled into their bones. Elias tended to the stove with the same focus he had used to navigate the storm, knowing that this heat was their new lifeline. He wrapped the cubs in heavy blankets, creating a nest of wool and safety near the hearth. As he cleaned the frost from their fur, he saw them begin to stir, their shivering finally coming to an end. The cabin was no longer just a building. It was a home, a fortress against the world outside. He shared the little food he had, a communion between man and wild, a promise of a tomorrow. When the storm finally broke, it revealed a world reborn in light. Elias stood at the door with his two small charges, looking out at the mountains that had nearly claimed them. In the coldest storm, they had found something unexpected, a second chance at life, and a lesson in the power of empathy. He knew that their paths would eventually diverge, but the bond formed in the ice would never truly be broken. They were a testament to the resilience of life and the unexpected beauty that can be found in the heart of chaos. The mountain was still there, but it was no longer an enemy. The bond formed in the heart of the storm was unbreakable. They were packed now. If this journey of survival and heart touched you, subscribe to WildEcho Tales for more powerful animal rescue stories. Like and share this video, because moments of compassion like this deserve to be remembered. Your support allows us to continue sharing the beauty and resilience of nature's most incredible stories. Thank you for being part of their second chance and for standing with us in the wild. Every like and share helps us tell more stories of rescue and hope. Until our next journey together, stay wild and stay compassionate. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you in the next one.